we are going to see another statement which is known as switch statement. Okay. And switch statement is what? It is used when one of the many code blocks to be executed. So there are many code blocks. I want to execute one of them depending on the condition. All right. But in if condition, what we do, we check the condition whether it is true or false. If it is true, then the block of code is executed. But in switch statement, what we do, we only check one of the many block of codes to be executed depending on the case that we select. Now, what is this? Let's see that a switch statement contains a expression. Okay, that expression is going to be evaluated, and depending on that, a matching expression against a case is executed. Now, how is that? Let's see this. Let's consider this example. Now, what is this example? So initially we have a const bill rate is equal to 40. Okay, we have created a variable called bill rate, and that is a number data type, and that is assigned a value called 40. So the switch statement starts like this. The switch is a keyword followed by the expression that we want to evaluate, and the curly bracket starts and ends. Okay. Within that, you will have the case statements. So case statements will match this expression. Like for example, 40. 40 is assigned to bill rate, and bill rate, if it is 40, then only that will be executed. In this case, 40 is this, and the value will be executed is this one. Okay. Now, before that, taking this complex example, let's go ahead and see one important example together. Say I want to create a switch statement. Maybe that I'll call it as color. Color is equal to, let's say, I'll initialize it to, let's say, blue. Everything in capital. Let me use it. Let's say it is blue. I have created a variable called color, and that has been initialized to blue. And now I'm going to use the switch statement. Switch, and then I'm going to see what color value is holding. All right. Now, first is their switch statements can have multiple cases depending on which case you need to execute. Case is a keyword and then followed by a value. Let's say the value is blue. All right. Now the value is what we are talking about is blue. Now blue value, whenever this blue value is encountered, I'm going to say console.log. Let's say color is blue. I mean, a straightforward, very simple statement. Color is blue. And then I'm going to what? I'm going to break. Break is again another keyword. I'll execute it. What this says, color is blue. Why? Because there is, in this case, we have only having only single case. Case is blue. The moment it will execute, the JavaScript starts here. It says color is blue. Then switch statement will start. It will see the expression. If the expression, in this case, it is color is holding the value blue, and this value is matched with the case value, whatever the case is holding. Case, if it is blue, both are matching, then this case statement which follows will be executed. That is what we are seeing here. If I go to, let's say here, what it says, evaluate an expression matching expression value against the series of case clauses, which is this clause. Now, for example, in this case, this is one clause. This is another clause you can go ahead and add like that. I can go ahead and say, let me clear this to give you multiple cases. if I go ahead and add, let's say, another case, let's say, this will be black. Okay, black case. If it is black, what I'm going to say, color is black. All right, then I'm going to break it. In the same way, I can go ahead and add as many as I want. All right, as many as statements I can go ahead and add. Instead of black, I can make it as white. WHITE, white. The color is white. So if here it is still blue because we have assigned the value as blue. Suppose if I go ahead and change this value to white. Now color is white is going to display. Why? Because the expression value is matching the case value. Then it will evaluate. If it matches, then that particular statement or the block of code will be, a piece of code will be executed, which follows the case statement until there is break. If I can go ahead and add multiple statements as well. Okay, and then the break encounters. So execute statements after the first case clause with a matching value. So the moment one of the value gets executed, it is not going to continue. It will break out of the loop. Okay, out of this switch statements. That's it. Because this is what is added. Break is to exit the switch statement. Once the expression matches the value, it will execute it, and then the break statement will execute, and that will take the control out of the switch statement. All right, that is why the break is used. And then default clause of a switch statement will be executed if no case matches. Now, so far in this example, what we have seen, there is a case called blue, there is a case called black, and there is a case called white. What if there is a case called red? Okay. Now, if it is red, nothing will execute. That is the reason you are not seeing any output, because none of the case that you have matches the expression, which is value. In this case, what you can do is you can set a default. So the default clause is something that you can add when none of the cases executes. So how can we add that? We can add that using default keyword. I can go ahead here, there is default, and then what I can say, and then enter console.log invalid color. That's it, invalid color. Then I want to have this particular thing executed. Now what is happening here, guys? The color is red. Okay, now this expression or a variable is holding the value called red, and if it is red, none of the clause is matching the value red, hence the default will be executed, which is saying invalid color. Okay, are you guys able to follow the switch statement so far?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. That is about the switch statements. In this, the same example, if you can see, the const bill rate is given 40, and if it is 40, then it will search for the case which is 40. 40 is here, and the case 40, nothing is there. Case 45, nothing is there. When there is no break statement, then what will happen? It will go here, it will go here, and take this as an output. Okay, if there is no break statement, can you see here, the case 25 has got this print statement, and then there is a break, but case 40 doesn't have any print and any break statement, which means it will start executing here, this is fine, and it will come here, it will execute and then print here, even the bill rate is 40. So whenever the bill rate is 40 or 45, only for both the cases this statement will be printed, because for both the cases this is the break, this is where it is going to break. Okay, if So always be careful that you add a break statement. Otherwise, if these break statements are missed out, every line of the case will be executed wherever there is a match. Okay, whatever there is a match, then that particular break line will be executed, and then it will go and then check out for other values. All right. So you able to understand this? All right.
Yes, sir.
Now let's concentrate something on what we call it as loops. Again, there is a shorthand representation of if statements as well we can do, and that we have already seen in the ternary operator, where we have an expression variable, then an expression, if it is true, the first value will be executed, otherwise the false value will be executed. That is what we saw in a conditional operators or a ternary operators. Now let's concentrate here in terms of loops. Now, one of the major thing, the problem that loops going to solve in any programming language is whenever there is a repetitive task. Okay, now just consider this. Suppose console.log, I want to print hello 5 times. Okay, so if I want to print hello 5 times, then five statements of console has to be added. Only then the five hellos will be printed to the console. Now this multiple statements of writing, this can be put down in terms of loops because there is involved. Okay, and loops are all about doing the same thing, which is nothing but the repetition of the tasks. You want to do the same thing, that in this case printing hello multiple times, which is 5 times. We are doing that using hello. Now, how many different kinds of loops are existing in JavaScript is multiple. Okay, one of the way to handle loops is through for loop. There is a while loop, or then or while loop also contains a do while loop as well. Okay, that is also another loop that you have in JavaScript. And then there is for off loop and for in loop. Let's consider these examples one by one and see how the loops are executed. The first one we'll talk about is a while loop. What does it will do? It will execute a block of code repeatedly while a given condition is satisfied, which means there is a condition that exists. And the moment that condition becomes false, the line immediately after the loop in the program is executed. Like, for example, you have this. Let's talk about this now. We saw this statement executing this multiple times. In the same thing can be handled in while loop. Let's do that. How we can do a while loop? Let's say I want to add a while loop. While loop will contain a condition. Okay, and until that condition is true, the block of code within it will be executed. Let's say I want to add here a variable. Let I is equal to, let's say, 5, because I want to print hello 5 times, right? And then I'm going to say I less than or equal to 5. Okay, until this. Now I is initialized it to, let's say, let's not initialize it to 5, let's initialize it to 1. So the moment it is 1, I is less than or equal to 5, which is true, the statement is true. And then the while loop starts within the flower brackets, and this flower bracket will print what? Console.log, and then I'm going to print hello. All right, now before I end here, because what will happen if I just execute it? This will go to an infinite loop. Why? I'll tell you. Infinite loop ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಏನ್ರಿ? The piece of code will execute again and again. It will never end. The while statement will never end, because what it will say, I is equal to 1. and now it will enter the while I is less than or equal to 5, which is true. This condition is true, and then this will be executed. Okay, and keep on executing because I is always 1, and which is less than 5. The condition will always be holding true, hence this condition will go to an infinite loop. So hence what is important is, if you forget to increase the variable used in the condition, the loop will never end, because the variable here is I variable. So what I need to do, I need to increment that, which means I can say I plus or equal to 1, which is I'm incrementing it by 1, which I plus plus or I plus equal to 1, which is again an addition assignment operator, which is nothing but your increment operator. What it says, the first time I is equal to 1, then this condition is holds true. It will print this hello once, and then it will execute it. I will be increased by 1. Here the I will become what? I will become 2. Okay, and then it will enter again the loop. 2 is less than 5, which is also true. Again it will print, again it will print until I becomes 5 and I become 6. The moment I become 6, with the condition will be false, then it will exit the loop. Now, if I go ahead and enter it, here you can see it is printing 5 times. So what is that it is printing? If I go ahead and say 1 second. I don't want to combine this. Group similar messages. So guys, this particular thing is, I want you to uncheck it, because in order to see the same thing again and again, this I need to remove it. Group similar messages in the console. So now what you can see, 1 2 3 4 5 5 times hello is getting printed, and that is happening because of the while loop. So what the console.log hello was printing 5 times, here this particular while loop can do the same thing of printing hello 5 times. Now, with that being said, there is also another loop in JavaScript known as do while loop. And do while loop will also execute a block of statements repeatedly until the condition is true, like the way that while statement is. But the only difference is that do while loop will execute at least once. Okay, it will execute at least once. So minimum number of times the while loop executes is 1 time. So how do we do that? Let's say in the do while loop, the same thing I'll take it. Okay, so what I can do, I can say, instead of this, I'll cut this and I'll say do this particular thing while I is less than or equal to 5. Okay, now what it will do, it will come here, I is equal to 1. The very first time it is going to print, it is going to do it. Okay, and then it will enter here, it will execute this, I is incremented by 1, then the while loop is, or while condition will be checked, which is holding true, then it will go back again. So the first time this statement is definitely going to be executed. It will do this first, and then the condition is checked. In this case, first the condition is checked and then the block of code will be executed. Here the block of code will be done first, it will do this first, and then the condition will be checked. And now just observe this, what it does and what it is doing is no difference. Only thing is, it will execute at least once. If I had given the condition, if I don't give any condition at all, this is still going to execute it for once. Okay, it will not check the condition. All right, this is about do while loop. Do while loop also is important that you will use this condition properly, otherwise this thing properly, otherwise this will also go into infinite loop. If this increment operator is not handled or you have not added here, then this is going to execute infinitely. Okay, that is what we call it as infinite loop. All right, the same, both are doing the same thing, and that is what we call it as do while loop. All right, and this is what the code we saw, that do a block of code will be executed until this condition is true. If the condition is false, then it will exit the do while loop. Now, let's understand JavaScript loops for loop. Very powerful, and I mean, every programmer need to know this particular loop because this is predominantly used in the developing world. Okay, for loop, irrespective of the programming language, this for loop has got widespread adoption. It's a favorite of a lot of people. Now let's understand what this for loop is. For loop will also help you to repeat the tasks, okay, multiple times. It will help you to repeat until a specified condition evaluates to false. So even for loop also has got a condition. Until that condition is true, the for loop keeps on executing. The moment that condition becomes false, then it will exit the for loop. Let's understand how the syntax of the for loop is going to look like. This is how the for loop will look like. What it is, for is a keyword, and within the open parenthesis and closed parenthesis, you can observe three expressions separated by semicolon. Okay, you have a semicolon here, you have a semicolon here. There is expression 1, expression 2, and expression 3 always. Okay, now you might say not all the expressions are mandatory, but condition is definitely mandatory. Okay, and depending on these expressions, the flower bracket, whatever the code is there within this particular block of code, will be executed. Now let's understand what are these expression 1, 2, and 3. So the very first expression, which is expression 1, is called as initial expression. Okay, initialization we call it as initial expression, where you might say let I is equal to 0. Now in this case, let's say in this case, I is equal to 1, and this can be used as the initial expression in the for loop. Okay, and then there is a condition here. So condition, the expression 2 is called a condition. The first expression is called the initial expression. The second expression is called the condition. Condition where it will evaluate to either true or false. Okay, I is less than or equal to 10 can be true or false depending on what the I value holds. Okay, this is called the condition. So the condition is true, then execute the block of code. The condition is false, exit the for loop. And then there is a third expression which is called as increment expression, where you are going to increment by I plus plus, which is nothing but this one, what you're doing here. This is called an increment expression, and this is called the condition in the for loop. The same thing I can put down in the for loop as well. Let's see that. So what we can do, for, then open and close parenthesis. Let's say let I is equal to 1 semicolon. Now for what I written just now is called a initial expression. And then I'm going to say I less than or equal to 5, which is nothing but the condition. And then I can say I plus plus, or I can say I plus equal to 1, which is also same as I plus plus, which is nothing but your increment operator. Once this is completed, I'm going to start the block of code within the curly brackets. And this block of code will be executed only if the condition is true. And for that, what I need to add, I need to add this particular statement. I need to add this particular statement. So what happens here? Initially, the code will start here. Let I is equal to 1, which is initialized. Now I will be 1. I is less than or equal to 5. This condition will be holding true. Then it will enter the loop. It will enter the loop. The moment this condition is true, it will enter this block. It will print. And once it is printing, then the increment happens. Okay, then the last expression will be executed, which is I will now become 2, and then it will be going back to the condition again. The initialization is only executed once, guys, mind you. This is only executed once during the start of the for loop. Next, only these two will be working. This is for only the first execution. Later, only these two will be having execution. All right. And if I execute this, it is going to print hello 5 times. So this for loop, what you see here, can be written in just 3 lines. And even I can put this curly bracket right here or right here as well. Okay. So in single line, you can write a for loop like this. This is perfectly fine. In a single line, you can go ahead and enter the for loop. All right. So this is how you are going to execute the for loop. So any questions, guys, so far in the for loop?
No, sir.
Okay, but you guys are able to understand how this contains multiple expressions, expression 1, 2, and 3. I mean, very generic, and you might have worked in multiple programming language. It is the same logic here. Nothing complex here. Only thing is, you need to remember this expression is going to start executing only once when you have a initialization, when the for loop execution starts, and then the condition will be checked. Condition, if it is true, enter the block. If condition is false, exit the block. Okay. Once the condition is true, it will execute, and then the expression 3 will be executed, and then again the condition is checked, then executed, then the condition increment or the decrement operator can be executed. All right. Now understand that it is not always I plus plus. You can go ahead and make I minus to decrement operate, use the decrement operator as well. Okay, that also can be done. Like for example, let's say let num is equal to 5. Okay, I have added 5, and now for loop, I can go ahead and say uh, num is equal to 5 comma, then num is uh, less than or equal to, num is greater than or equal to 1, and num minus minus. I can go ahead and add it, and then within the curly bracket, what I can go ahead and do, console.log, I'm going to print num. So if you observe here, guys, what I'm trying to do, I am trying to print the numbers in decreasing order, and what I wanted to demonstrate here is the usage of decrement operator rather than the increment operator. Okay, this particular for loop, what it does, it is just going to print the numbers starting from 5 all the way to 1. Okay, this is like printing the numbers in the reverse order. All right, where I'm going to use the num minus minus. So just to demonstrate that not always plus plus, it is can be a minus depending on the how you want to increment. It can be if you want to add the numbers, print the numbers which are multiples of 2, again that can be done here as well. Okay, all that can be done depending on what the condition and how you want to increment it. Okay. All right, with that being said, let's talk about very particular to JavaScript, what we call it as for off loop. Okay, you might have not seen this in other programming language, but in JavaScript there is something. In Python we have something, but in other languages we don't. We'll talk about what is this for off loop. For a loop, what it does, it will also a loop statement, okay, that loops through the values of a iterable object. What is this iterable object? Iterable objects are like arrays, strings, maps, and node lists. All these are a kind of a iterable objects which are holding more than one values, and there is a there is a string value associated, there is a sequence associated with them, there is an iteration associated with them. We'll call that as a iterable objects. Now, what is the syntax for this for of loop? For is you have a variable of iterable. Okay, so you can say a item of an iterable or a variable of an iterable and then execute a block of code. Now, let's take some example. Sum total is equal to, let's say, I'll initialize it to 0. And then I'm going to say, let we have array. What array I have defined? I have defined the array as list. List is equal to 11, 22, 33, 44. Okay, this is good enough. And then for, let's say, let I of list I have taken, and then I'm going to say what? Sum total. I'm going to add sum total. Sum total is equal to sum total plus the I. I'm adding that. So what I'm trying to do, I'm taking each element, which is an item, sum total, which is fine. And then I'm going to end this loop. And at the end of the loop, what I'm going to print here, let's say console.log. I'm going to add what is there in the I, which is fine. And then in the final, I'm going to say console.log. Inside the console.log, let's say sum total is equal to, and here I'm going to add, let's say, I'm going to use the black tick characters, guys. This is a back tick where I can add an expression. Inside sum total, I can go ahead and say dollar, and then what value I can add? Maybe I can go ahead and add, let's say sum total. Sum total. Okay. This is same, right? Sum total I'm going to add. So if I execute this, what is happening? List has already been defined. Oh, okay. So list has already been defined. Let's rename it to list one because I have used it just now, right? Rename it to list one. I'll copy this. I'll make this as a list one, and okay, good. Yeah. Now it is doing the job. So now what you can see here, guys, there is initially I have declared a variable called 0, and this is the list that I have created. List is nothing but is your iterable. Like in our example, there is a iterable that we have, and this is a part of the iterable. Like for example, 11. 11 is one of the variable or the item of an iterable. Okay, so 11 is one value variable value, 22, 33, 44 are all the iterable values. Okay, so for each iterable value I am going to do certain tasks, which is let I is this item of a array, I of this list. Okay, for each list, the very first it will take is 11. So it will come here, and what I'm going to do, sum total. Initially, the sum is initialized to 0. This 0 plus I in the first case will be 11. So 11 plus 0 will be 11. Okay, 11. So this is how the trace will be. I'm just putting the trace here, guys. Okay, the first what will happen, sum total will be equal to 0, the first thing, which is nothing but this value, and I will be taken holding the value called 11 for the first one. 11 will be taken. 11 plus I, the sum total after the execution of that block will be equal to 11. Okay. Here it will happen. 0 plus 11 will be assigned to 11. Then I am printing the I. I is printing here called what? The I will be 11. Then what happens in the second iteration? It will come, I will be 22. So 22. So ST for the second iteration will be equal to 11. And I will be holding the value 22. Okay. Will be holding the value 22. And then 11 plus 22 will be 33. ST will hold the value 33 because the sum total is holding the value called 11. 11 plus 22 will be, this value will be 33. And then it will go and pick the third item, which is 33 in this case. Then it will be ST is equal to ST here, it will be containing 33 sum total, and the I value will be equal to 33 because the next item will be picked, this item. And then the ST will be 33 plus 33, which will be equal to 66 because sum total is holding 33. Then the I value, item value is 33. Sum of them will be 66. And then ST, which is now holding the value of 66, but I will be what? The next item, which will be 44. I will be equal to 44, and then ST value will be 44 plus 66, and this will be equal to 110. This is how the logic and the trace of this for loop would execute. Are you guys able to understand this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Now, like the way we saw it here in the what section we saw that taking as an example of an array. Now we can take that as an example of a string as well. Okay, we can go ahead and work around with the string as well. Let's say let const academy is equal to let's say it is skills app. Okay, yes, let's say this as a, instead of this, academy is equal to string. Okay, this is a string. And now, mind you, string is also an iterable object. Okay, it is also an iterable object. What I can go ahead and do, for let item of academy, and then I'm going to put console.log. Inside that console.log, I'm going to print item, whatever the item that I have selected. I can go ahead and execute it. So what is this going to print? It is going to take character, each character of a skillsam, because it is character. As you know, string is a iterable object. Iterable object in the sense it is indexed, and you can have iteration around that particular object. Now here, yes, the moment S is taken, the first item of an academy is taken, you are printing that first item. That is the reason you can see S here. And next, it will loop again to the next particular character, then K will be printed. And next, it will loop again for the next character, I will be selected, so on and so forth. Hence, you are going to see all these print, okay, skillsam, until the end of a string happens. The exit for this for loop is end of a iterable object. Either it is an array or it is a string. Okay, makes sense? Now, what is this node list? We'll see that whenever we talk about a DOM objects, right? We are going to see what this node list is. I'm going to talk about that. And maps is nothing but your array maps. And maps also is something, a method that is a complex array method. We are going to see that later. Okay, what are those maps and how maps, filter, and other things can be used. We'll see that, and it will create again iterable object, and that will take it in some time. Now, the finally in the for loop is a for in loop. Now, for off loop was talking about an iterable object. For in loop is to loop the properties of an object. Okay, it is for in loop is all about objects, and for in loop iterates over property names. Okay, it will iterate over property names, and whereas for off loop will iterate over property values. So we saw that how it will evaluate and go ahead about iteration in terms of values. Now we'll see how for in loop works. Okay, for in loop has this particular syntax: for key in object. Okay, now you know that an object contains key value pairing, right? For each key this is going to iterate. Okay, that is what the for in loop is. And now let's go ahead and see what it is. Let me clear this. Let's talk about a for in loop. It contains key and it contains what? It contains object, both of them. All right, now let's go ahead and see that. Let's say I want to create an object, const. I want to create an object of toys, let's say. Let's say I call it a toy. And then within the, sorry. So what is that name of the toy? Let's say I'll call that as Spider-Man. Okay, Spider-Man. And when was this manufactured date? Okay, manufactured date. Manufactured, let's say, date. And that manufactured date I can put down as 12/12/12 or 12/12/22. 22. All right, and then I'm going to talk about let's say, yeah, this two is enough. Spider-Man, when was it manufactured? Let's, for the example, if this is fair enough. I have a object called toy and which contains a name and its manufacture date. All right, now I want to use what is known as a for in loop. I want to loop through this particular object, which is basically I want to print Spider-Man followed by the manufacturing date. Okay, that is what I need to print it. You reading this particular object and putting that into a for in loop. And how can I do that? For that, what I'll do is for, let's say, I'm going to add let key, or I can say let item, let item in toy, which is our object. So key in object, that is what key is item, and the object is this. And then inside that, what I'm going to add, I'm going to add a, let's say I'm going to add a string, or maybe I can add a string here, a variable which I am going to print. Uh, let output is equal to, I'm going to make it as a blank string, initialize it to blank string. Let's see. And now output plus is equal to, which is this output. Initially it is empty. Now I am adding that. What I am adding? I am going to add this particular item. All right. And then I'm going to add output plus is equal to, then I'm going to add a blank, simple space. I'll tell that why we need a space and what it is. Just I'm going to execute that. And finally, I'm going to put a output statement console.log and then add a output. Now, understand this. The moment I execute it, it is going to execute Spider-Man followed by the manufacturing date. Now, the very first is, first we have created an object, and then we have created a simple string, which is an empty string, which is output that I wanted to print in order to loop through this object and print the output. Now, when I enter the for in statement, initially we have this key for item in Troy. For each key in this particular object, I'm going to iterate. The first item will be selected, which is nothing but name. So for name, whatever the value it is holding, it enters the loop. Output is equal to toy of an item, which means for this particular name, which means toy of a name, whatever the value it is nothing but Spider-Man. So I am concatenating this. What does this mean? This is nothing but stating ಇದು ಏನ್ರಿ whatever what you see here is the concatenation, string concatenation, which is nothing but writing string is equal to what I'm saying, output plus this value. Output is what initially it is blank, so nothing, so just it will going to print Spider-Man, because Troy of value will be name for the first item, which is this value name. And the next one, then it will add what, it will again concatenate the output with a space. What you see the space here is, which is this space. Okay,